Masculinity. According to Wikipedia, masculinity is having qualities or appearance traditionally associated with men, especially strength and aggressiveness. Especially strength and aggressiveness. Synonyms include virile, macho, manly, muscular, strong, rugged, brawny, powerful, and well-built. But there are many men who do not fit this definition. Very few men can claim all or even most of these attributes. Plenty of men are not in great physical shape. Very few are rugged. So, where does this concept of masculinity come from, if it's practically unattainable? As in many cases, I realize that the media has had a huge hand in creating this image of masculinity. So, being a millennial, I Googled it. I Googled masculinity. These are the top 5 pictures. All of the men in these pictures are exceptionally well built. Likely they're photoshopped. In 2 of them, the trait of aggression is highlighted. The picture with the crowd is of Brad Pitt in Fight Club. Then there's the picture of ancient Greek and Viking masculinity, which shows an armed man flexing. The other pictures show men lifting and showing off their muscles. One even asks, "Are you a man?" Then there's an image of word association. Strong, confident, tough. This imagery bombards men and young boys, shaping how they view what is expected of them and their values. Young men are taught how to behave. They're taught that being muscular, strong, tough, and aggressive is important. Next, I googled masculine, which yielded different results. All of these men have an exceptional physique, and many of them are only partially clothed, which contributes to the view of men as sexual creatures. A few of the pictures even have the word masculine on the picture. Next, I searched men. This is the result. The men in these images are so similar looking that they could all easily be brothers. So much time is spent talking about how the images women see are so uniform that they present a false image of beauty. But are the images we present to men any different? Here's some more images that were found in these searches. Muscles, physical prowess, athleticism, sexual prowess, heterosexuality, aggression. Now I feel I have a pretty good idea of what masculinity is. But why is it important? Why should I care what society says masculinity is? It seems like the problems that would be caused by masculinity would mostly be a problem for women. So this is a woman's issue, right? Well, here's what Bell Hooks has to say about why men should care about how society tells us to act. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem. According to Michael Kimmel, society pressures young boys to conform to certain views of masculinity. Men are pressured by their fathers, brothers, uncles, and even mothers and sisters to conform. They are also pressured by their peers. They pressure young men to show no emotion, to be strong, to not be a pussy. If the boys reach a certain age, usually around middle school, and do not manage to perform this psychic self-mutilation, which is the cutting off of emotion, then other boys will attempt to cut it off for them. And how do they do it? They tease, belittle, physically and mentally assault the boy until they conform to society's views of masculinity. This is what Michael Kimmel calls gender policing. It is often experienced in different ways. Here is trans activist Janet Mock's experience with her father.
And so my father, who was in the Navy when I was a child, was very much vocal about like his son not acting like a sissy,
right.
You know? And those were, I talk about how that was one of the first like labels I remember about myself was sissy.
Right.
And then how it then numbed me to greater words that came on, sharper words that were thrown against my body. And I think that my father, that was his way of caring, was through gender policing, which then taught me that who I was wrong, and I internalized a lot of that stuff, but luckily I kind of unpacked that throughout my life. In the second grade, I told my teacher I wanted to be a secretary. right? And then she wrote a note to my father about my femininity and all this stuff. And my father then policed me and gave me this lecture about what boys do, what girls do, blah, blah, blah.
This is where the term toxic masculinity comes from. I call it toxic masculinity because, much like a toxin, whether we take it in consciously or not, it affects everyone's life in a negative way. This culture of masculinity we have in America seems to cut men off from their emotions, to make them stoic. This can often lead to outbursts of rage and pent-up emotions, and unfortunately, if men aren't policing other men, that anger is taken out on women. And increasingly often that anger is taken out on themselves. Since male gender policing began to rise in the 80s, the suicide rate among young men has soared. Today, the suicide rate among college-age men is 4 times greater than that of women. And it is also increasing among younger and younger men. Men are suffering. There are many reasons, but toxic masculinity is a large part of the issue. When boys and men are taught that they have to conceal parts of themselves to fit a societal standard, we internalize them. Cultural ideal that is spawned by sexism because men are told not to be weak like women. And men are told that they should stand up for themselves and be strong like men, not women. Women are weak. And that's why feminism is so important for men. Because feminism seeks to balance out gender. It seeks to make female attributes and male attributes equal, not one greater than the other. It seeks to neutralize the effects of sexism on the world. Because women aren't the only ones that experience sexism. Men do too. And not in the way of discrimination, but in the way in which other men who have been beaten and bullied and assaulted and harassed by their fathers and brothers and uncles and siblings harass other men in order to shape how they live their lives.